The surging Habs ready to bolster their lineup on the trade front. Canada's short list to cover for injuries at the Olympics just got even shorter. And a really strange series of events involving Olympic goalie Jordan Binnington last night. With the details on those stories, here's our insider, Pierre LeBrun. Pierre, the Habs now just a point out of top spot in the entire Eastern Conference, and they've got their eyes on the flame.
Well, let me just start by saying that I think the Habs are in no hurry to make their next move. They just acquired Phil Deneau before the holidays. Yes, they're in a great place right now, playing great, but the Eastern Conference standings, as you know, Gino, are absolutely jammed. My sense is Montreal would like to get to the Olympic break and then take stock of where they are in the standings, where their goaltending is. It's been better lately, as we know, and then decide if they're going to add another big piece. If they do, it is my understanding that Blake Coleman is high on their list. Now, there's other players on their trade list. Every playoff contender draws up a list at this time of year. But Blake Coleman is a player of interest. He's a guy that brings some elements that the Habs are not as high on, and his physicality, his versatility. He's a two-time Stanley Cup champion. He is of interest to the Montreal Canadiens. But of course, as I've mentioned before, Gino, he's of interest to a lot of teams. And he's the player that Calgary gets the most calls on and have since the start of the season. There is no guarantee Calgary trades him. I mean, he's got another year in his deal at $4.9 million. He's beloved in that dressing room. He's a leader. So we're not even sure if Calgary's ready to move him before the March 6th trade deadline. But if they are, I do expect Montreal to try to get in there in a real way. The other thing to keep in mind with this, Gino, Blake Coleman has a say in all this. He has a 10-team list where he can get dealt to without his consent. Otherwise, 2/3 of the league needs his consent. So he'll have a big say in whether or not he gets dealt and where he gets dealt if that happens.
The puck drops on the Winter Olympic Hockey Tournament in a month, and all the teams, including Canada, are facing some question marks because of injury. They want to keep their option open, but they also want to be fair to the players. So how do they draw that balance, Pierre?
Yeah, so, I was curious, like I think a lot of people were, how exactly the process worked after every country named their team, as a lot of countries have done over the last week. In theory, the rules allow for the entirety of your IOC long list that was submitted before the NHL season to be your reserve list if you want it. So Canada still has 60-plus names on that list. That's not what Team Canada's decided to do, because staying on the reserve list right now means that you continue to be in the IOC anti-doping protocol and you get tested all the time. So Canada has shortened their list and prioritized it to about 15 players, I'm told, which makes more sense. That's still a lot of names. It's flexible so that if certain players get hot between now and Milan, that they can move those names up and down, those 15 options. But basically, those 15 players have been told that they're on the reserve list, and obviously they can opt out if they don't want to be on it, if they don't want to be part of the IOC testing anymore. As of now, no one has opted out, I'm told, Gino. And so when you think of, let's say, the forwards, I think there's some pretty obvious names that are part of that 15. Sam Bennett, Connor Bedard, Mark Scheifele, Wyatt Johnston is having a great year. And I know all the Four Nations players that were not brought back are also part of that 15. So that includes Seth Jarvis, Travis Konechny. So we'll see where all this goes. But the bottom line is this. There isn't a guy who's number one on the list, It really depends on what kind of injury Canada may get before Milan as to who on that list gets the call. It's really about the role and where you fit on that.
Speaking of the Olympics, another rough start for Jordan Binnington last night. He gave up 7 of the Hawks, and Jim Montgomery tried to pull him, but he couldn't because he couldn't find the backup Joel Hofer. What happened, Pierre?
So I'm glad you asked, because I think there was a misconception. I don't blame people for the way that looked. Like, essentially, people said, well, Jordan Binnington didn't allow himself to get pulled. That's not what happened. After talking to people around the situation here this morning, what happened is Joel Hofer wasn't ready to go in right away. When Jim Montgomery tried to do the goalie switch, Chicago, in terms of the backup goalie situation, isn't ideal. Hofer was back in the dressing room at the time, still wasn't fully geared up, and by the time he got fully geared up, and there's a shot of him in the hallway there, the puck had dropped. They had missed their window to make the goalie switch. So this was more about Joel Hofer not being ready to jump in when that goalie switch was supposed to happen than Jordan Binnington having any say in it. So good to clear that up.
Now that we know what happened, it's kind of an amusing story. But what isn't funny, Binnington's save percentage isn't even in the top 50 in the league right now. The full version of Insider Trading with Pierre and Dregs is coming up on the early edition of SportsCenter.